Now, as proposed in the Queen's speech today, landlords in England will be forced to rent out vacant shops that have been empty for more than a year. That's part of the government's levelling up agenda. This proposal comes after Boris Johnson claimed that boarded up premises were, as he called them, a blight on our towns and cities, hindering local economies. But is this move a political gimmick, as suggested by the British Property Federation, or can it really help to rejuvenate our hollowed-out high streets? Well, I'm delighted to welcome here in the studio John Hoyle. He is CEO and founder of Sook, and this is a company which turns vacant shops into affordable and adaptable space for any brand or business, bookable on an hourly basis, really at the cutting edge of trying to remodel and reconfigure our high street. And Catherine McBride is still with us in the studio. John, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. What an interesting idea. How's it going?
It is booming. I mean, there's never been more need for a refreshing idea on the high street. If you read the levelling up executive summary, there's all this discussion about how we need a Renaissance-type movement to actually address the economic problems that we face. And what we do with Sook is actually sell time, not space, which is a revolutionary idea for the high street and has been met with enormous interest from both landlords and occupiers.
We've seen, haven't we, on many high streets, viewers and listeners will know this from their own experience, shops have been turned into residential properties. But what you're doing isn't that, is it? What you're doing is that you're creating shops that can be rented, not for years at a time, but hours at a time or a couple of days. If somebody wants to stage an event, if somebody wants to provide some kind of service. Tell us a little bit about your client base, both the one you have already and the client base you expect to develop going forward.
Absolutely. Well, I'm obsessed with utility. And for me, the high street is not just about retail. It's about amenity, wellness, event space, as you mentioned. And it's also about creating sustainable income for landlords, who are not the enemy in the high street issues that we're faced with. Our client base is really wide, from huge brands like Uber, MasterCard, SumUp, Radley, who are women's accessories brands, to hundreds of much smaller brands, huge amount of Gen Z interest, Depop sellers, Instagrammers, TikTokers, and then community use, everyone from hypnobirthing and baby massage to a guy who used one of our spaces in central London, made it to a shrine to his girlfriend and proposed to her. So, our belief is that, and it's called Sook, the Arabic word for marketplace, we want to create spaces that reflect the communities in which they're based and can be used by everyone.
What you're saying is really chiming with the ideas of a retail legend we interviewed for My Money Talks series here on The Money, Bill Grimsey, who you may know, former CEO of Iceland.
He launched his report in our space.
Used to run Wix. I mean, this guy really knows his onion when it comes to British retail, and he is all about a retail man to his fingertips, making the British high street a place where you experience as well as you just shop. That may work well in a posh London suburb. It may work well in Harrogate or in Manchester. Will it work in Britain's small towns, the ones that we really need to help to regenerate?
Well, obviously, we believe so. And it's very simple. It's about thinking about how you use shops differently. No one needs, with the exception of the convenience stores, a shop 7 days a week. We all know that a Monday and a Saturday are completely different places, wherever you are in the country. So why not repurpose, rather than having a static model that relies on a Saturday to actually drive sustainability, and open up the tens of thousands of empty units to all sorts of other uses that can generate revenue and can pay some of these business rates that the government is so fixated upon, driving much-needed cash into local authorities' coffers.
We do need to do something, don't we, Catherine? I know you've thought deeply about the future of the high street. We've obviously talked about business rates today, as we pretty much always talk about business rates, don't we, when you're on the show. What do you think of John's idea? We are going to need some innovative thinking, aren't we? And this does sound innovative.
Oh, it's a very good idea. And I live near a high street that was decimated after the financial crisis, and eventually, slowly, the shops came back, but they were different shops. And we've changed the way we buy things and what we buy. Right now, there's a couple of empty shops that have got still these companies with a whole lot of guys on electric scooters that will deliver anything to you really quickly. And I find that kind of weird. I knew that started in the pandemic, but I expected it to go away after the pandemic, and it didn't go away. but there was another big auction house that was near me that closed down, and that's now been turned into an events company. And that's a new experience. But I'd like to see shops in small towns be turned back into housing, because a lot of them were houses originally, and a lot of shopkeepers lived above their houses, and now we've suddenly got a housing shortage and we've got empty shops. Now it's like, just change the zoning.
So once you lose a retail unit, you pretty much lost it forever, haven't you, if you turn it into a shop? Isn't it a little bit sad if you've got a wonderful arcade of shops and every third one is a house? Doesn't it kind of kill the vibe a little bit?
But if we are choosing to buy things on the internet, and people are, do we still need shops?
Here's a question for you.
You know, shops could become an experience rather than a place you buy stuff. You know, you can go there to, think of how many coffee shops there are now on any high street in London compared to 30 years ago when I arrived, and I came from Sydney where we had a lot of coffee shops.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that you didn't have any coffee shops. Now you've got a coffee shop every 10 shops.
Certainly in London you have. Across a lot of the country, though, John, as you will know, I know this, I live in a small town in the east of England, relatively prosperous, but it's still the case. Because landlords, they get a tax break if they give their units to charity shops. You have so many charity shops, which for all the good work that people do in charity shops, giving their time, and they help keep communities together. I'm not dissing charity shops, but there are so many. Do you think we need to revisit that tax break in order to try and push us to do things that are actually commercially sustainable and generate revenue and tax and really regenerate a high street? Because you cannot regenerate a high street on charity shops, nail bars and coffee shops.
I totally agree. However, I would expand the breaks rather than penalising the existing charity shops if it were up to me. There are two key players who have it within their gift to make changes. The first, which we've discussed at length, is business rates. The announcement about repurposing shops and giving local authorities the power to do so is, I think, a bit of a diversion from a much simpler approach, which would be to subsidise business rates in lieu of actually wholesale tax reform. But the other group that also have a lot of power to make changes are landlords who chase bankable occupiers. And of course, there's more retail in the world than ever has been before, but it often is startup, it's online, it's new stuff like the gaming industry. It's huge, but landlords have failed to find a way to embrace those occupiers. So if we can get business rates addressed and landlords more amenable to agile and flexible retail, then we've got a great chance of actually bringing life back to our high streets, even in this imminent downturn.
We're often at the cutting edge in the UK, aren't we, of these kind of trends? What else? Where are you getting your ideas from? Is this happening elsewhere, your model? Have you imported this from somewhere, or is this fresh out the box?
Yeah, this is a brand new idea. It's not happening anywhere else in the world. In fact, we're exporting to North America. We're opening in Montreal this year, and also the GCC, both Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So I hope that actually this will be a great British export. And isn't that what we all hope to hear today, about us leading the way? Because let's face it, the one thing we do have a lot of in terms of assets here is brains, well-educated people who could and should think differently. And that's what it's going to take to get us through, some difficult times ahead.
John Hoyle of Sook, I've really enjoyed the conversation. Very, very interesting. Let us know how the business goes, and we'll return to this subject. And as ever, Catherine McBride, economist and fellow at the Centre for Brexit Studies. We talked about business rates. We didn't talk about trade, which is your